All right, good Wednesday evening, everyone. Thanks for stopping by for a check of your forecast. Hope everyone's doing well this evening. It is February 4th, year of our Lord 2026. We've got some warm and quiet weather to talk about for the foreseeable future. And when we talk about that, we're talking about like the next 5 to 6 days. We are expecting some changes in the second half of February. We'll kind of get on into that as well here over the next 5 to 10 minutes. But overall, quiet weather heading into this weekend, and we'll probably carry that with us through the first couple of days of next week before we really start getting into some of those bigger changes in our upcoming weather pattern. Right now, we've just got northerly flow. It was a breezy day here in the Texas Panhandle. We had winds gusting around 30 to 40 miles per hour, so definitely nuisance level. We are expecting those winds to be much calmer tomorrow, but they still may turn to the north in the afternoon with our next surface trough trying to sweep across the area. It's already 39 here in Amarillo, so getting a little bit chilly out there. If you're going to be out tonight and tomorrow morning, you're going to want that jacket. It's going to be useful to you. And again, with the clear skies and calm conditions, temperatures are going to continue to cool off. We'll have a lot of that radiant cooling happening overnight tonight, so we'll probably fall down below freezing by tomorrow morning. So just make sure you've got that extra layer with you if you plan on being outside tomorrow morning. You'll get to shake the layers off periodically throughout the day, especially if you're going to be out there working and being a little bit more labor intensive. We'll be in the higher 60s in the afternoon, and we'll probably even get into those mid 70s down to around Hall, Childress, and Cottle County there in the rolling plains. It's going to be going to be a very warm day for a February afternoon. Let's go ahead and run through the next 2 days. Really not a whole lot to talk about from an active weather perspective. We will have that surface trough come through tomorrow, so you will see the winds shift direction. Probably won't see much change in those temperatures. We do have a backdoor cold front though on Friday night. This is something models have been kind of struggling to pick up on, but it may provide us with a pretty sharp gradient in temperatures. I think it may be a little even more sharp than what you're being seeing. That's what's being betrayed on a lot of our computer models over the next couple of days. We'll see how that transpires, but I think most of us will be warm on Friday. There could be a small section up towards Lipscomb and Beaver County that are definitely colder and maybe a little bit more near normal highs in the 50s, and then probably a lot more of those 30s and 40s as you get back into Kansas. But it should be a pretty sharp gradient from warm weather in the near 70s to probably the 40s and 50s up in that direction. So here's our next upper level low. This is again the possible shift in that pattern that we're eyeing towards the middle of the month, and it looks like the second half of February could be relatively active. Now, that does not mean that we're talking about rain or snow. Probably will be periods in there in that 2 week span where it is possible, but there's also periods that we'll probably be talking about fire weather concerns also on top of that, just depending on the exact track of these low pressure centers. This one will be pretty weak. This is early in the week. It's a very positive tilt trough. So all that moisture is going to stay much closer to the Gulf Coast than it's going to be up here in the Panhandle. So any rain that's associated with it, maybe even some severe weather in the southeast, will probably be very close to the Gulf Coast. I mean, we're talking only a couple hundred miles away from the shore, from the beaches. So areas maybe as far north as probably like the central Texas area, maybe DFW could maybe see some of that moisture pull in, but I don't think we're going to get much of that to return this far north on the other side of the state. There is a second trough that's set to come through at the end of next week. That one may pose of higher interest to us, just given its track. The question is, will we have moisture to work with? That first one coming through a couple days beforehand, that might be a limited supply for us. Now, this will be another thing to watch too. Getting past Valentine's Day, models have been very much on board with a deeper trough, potentially diving down into the desert southwest. That might be the bigger of the three systems that could provide us with more of a hiccup in the forecast of this benign weather pattern that we're in. Does not mean that we'll see rain, does not mean we'll see snow, does not mean we'll see fire weather. It could be one of those three, could be all three, just depending on how strong it is and the exact track that it takes. But that's still about 10 to 12 days out. So we're in between that 1 to 2 week time frame. The signal is there. It's just really how deep does it get and the exact track that it's going to take. I'm going to go ahead and show you just again some ensemble members over the next couple of weeks. Again, just take these with a grain of salt, especially as we get past about 7 days out. But you can see again, there's that big trough down in the southeast, which is again going to bring that surface trough through tomorrow. It's going to keep that northerly wind in place, but we've got a really dominating ridge up in the Pacific Northwest and the northern Rockies. That's going to allow for a lot of warmer weather to overspread into the central plains and the central part of the continental U.S. It does eventually shift to the east, and this is as we move into the weekend, and you can see there's that tiny little feature that we think will maybe provide some moisture to the other side of Texas, down here closer to the Gulf Coast. And then here comes the second system. You can see that one kind of flattens out and becomes more zonal getting towards the end of next week as well. And then here's the bigger trough. Again, you can see even as we get out to hour 282, so take this with a grain of salt, there's a lot of confidence. When you're talking about anomalies this deep from what's considered null space or normal or near normal, this is definitely a it's going to heighten our senses and definitely raise an eyebrow. If you got a big trough out here that does take shape somewhere around that second half of February, that could definitely mean more active weather for us. And you can see as we get a little bit further out, it kind of loses a little bit of its confidence, but that's to be expected from ensembles as you get further away from what's considered current. So there's that trough that sweeps through the southeast over the next couple of days. This is the GFS ensemble. You can see kind of the same story with, again, that ridge up top there in the northern plains through the weekend. Very subtle low coming down the Baja Peninsula, and then just kind of weakening and fading away as we get into the first part of next week. It doesn't sweep it up through Texas as a Miller type A or B, but it does create at least some southwest flow, and we'll probably get a little bit of some lift aloft downstream. So I still think areas kind of down here and maybe the I-10 corridor may have a shot for some isolated showers and some weaker thunderstorms. There's the second trough. GFS is a little bit more potent with it in terms of how much you've got some amplification in it. It does have it dying out though as it gets over the central plains. Again, it just kind of doesn't survive the trek through the interior mountains. And then here comes that third one again, pretty north, pretty far north compared to the ensembles from the Euro, but definitely still a good signal there for some troughing out here in the western part of the country. And the Canadian generally has been painting the same picture as well. Trough down in the southeast this weekend. Here comes that weak little low, ridge over top on the weekend, which is going to keep us pretty warm and mild. We're talking about 70s probably for our high temperatures. It does have it coming through Texas. The Canadian ensemble has this next trough fading away and staying pretty zonal. So we'll still probably stay dry and pretty quiet through a good majority of next week. And then we'll see what that third system does. That one looks like it could be the bigger of the three that we'll have to talk about. And that's the one that models have been very split on here over the last couple of days. Let's go ahead and show you some of these meteograms from the ensembles. This is the 2-meter temperature trend. We're going to jump back over to the 12Z that goes out much further. You can see again, lots of yellows and oranges there on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. So that is very much a general consensus. Probably going to be pretty warm over the next 5 to 7 days. You start getting into a little bit more muddled or muddy water in terms of a muddled forecast. We'll see what exactly happens. But as we get into that same window, you can start to see again maybe a couple of signs where there's definitely some mixed opinions as to what those troughs are going to do. So this is actually the second one that will probably come through on Wednesday, Thursday, and then this is that third one around Valentine's Day. And you can see again maybe a little bit more of some confusing muddy water there as we get into the week 2 time frame. Not a whole lot of winter precipitation being depicted for Amarillo, which we kind of talked about that the last several days. Southwest flow is active. It's not necessarily cold for us. And so that is another thing that we'll have to monitor. If we do get some precipitation, I think we would probably heavily be leaning towards a rain event rather than any kind of winter weather event. You can see there's kind of 2 areas of interest, maybe a first one right here around Wednesday, Thursday, and then probably more of a Friday, Saturday. We'll see how this all kind of shapes out over the next week, but the GFS definitely still split on what to expect. You got maybe 1 or 2 ensemble members in here suggesting there's any kind of significant winter weather with it, but a large majority of them heavily saying that this will be a liquid precipitation event if it were to happen. It's also possible we end up in the dry slot and we end up with some wildfire concerns instead. Not much of the winter weather being depicted on the Canadian either. So that's kind of what we're looking at. It's going to be pretty quiet heading into the next 5, 6 days. So your 7 days, there's not a whole lot to look at. I mean, if you like sunny and 75 like Joe Nichols, then you'll definitely be enjoying the weekend. 71 Friday will probably be the nicest day if you're looking for some calmer winds. The winds will be out of the southwest Saturday. They could be a little bit breezy in the afternoon, but they shouldn't be terrible. We'd just call them probably a pretty standard wind here in the Texas Panhandle, around 15 miles an hour, which for the ag producers, probably a little bit higher than they'd want if they're trying to get the sprayers out and things like that. But for most of us that just do day-to-day activities, 15-mile-an-hour wind is pretty standard for us. And then moving into next week, much of the same on Monday, Tuesday, a lot of low 70s, and then we'll have that next cold front come through. Temperatures probably a little bit closer to normal, but still above that average high of 54 degrees. That's all we got for you guys. Thank you so much for stopping by. Enjoy the rest of your evening. When we get closer to the middle of the month, we'll have a better idea as to what to expect from this change in the weather pattern, where we'll start seeing some more persistent troughing and potentially some storm systems coming from the west and sweeping across the country to the east. We usually get about a 3 or 4 week window at some point in the winter where it gets more active, and it looks like maybe late February, that first week of March might end up being that window for us, where if we're going to see any kind of consistency and maybe having some periodic shots for some active weather, that's when it's probably going to happen. That is what I'm going to leave you guys with for this evening. Enjoy the rest.